Welcome, brothers and sisters. It's good to have you here on this Wednesday evening for our services, Farmington Church of Christ. As you're listening to this, Lord willing, others are having our first seated class in a long time. So pray for them that things go well and a lot of good comes from that. We're praying for you at home and praying for an end to this pandemic that has kept us apart for a time. And so we hope we can get together soon. The lesson tonight is another one from Psalms. As we've been studying tonight, we'd like to take a look at Psalms 25. If you'd like to turn your Bibles to that, and we'll be reading that in just a moment. Trust and fear. Trust and fear. The two do not seem to go together, do they? They seem to be opposites, in fact, if you think about it. Trust is what is trust? A feeling of safety, security, confidence. That's trust. What is fear? Well, the opposite of that, to me, uncertainty. Danger, maybe. Danger? You know, a small child is likely fearful of a stranger, and we teach them that for good reason. But she might trust her parents, so I hope she does. She trusts her parents. So the difference between that is apparent. Well, we as adults trust and are comfortable with the things that we understand and the things that we know. That makes us comfortable, but we're fearful of uncertainty and we're fearful of walking into an unknown situation. And that's the way we're put together. So trust and fear does seem opposite, really. And so our goal tonight is to try and understand what the meaning is in this psalm. And let's give attention to the notion of trusting and fearing God at the same time. Is that a possibility, to trust and fear at the same time as we look at this psalm? So turn with me, if you would, to Psalms 25. And let's start out just looking at down through verse 7. And we'll read that together. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O God, in you I trust. Let me not be put to shame. Let not my enemies exult over me. Indeed, none who wait for you shall be put to shame. They shall be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Remember your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love, for they have been from old. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me, for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. Well, we know that David, who is the psalmist here, was far from perfect. He made a lot of mistakes. So do a lot of us. But he did have a very strong desire to live for God and to serve God. And we know that from history, and we know that from looking at his writings. Look at verse 1 more carefully, if you would. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. One translation, I think it's the New Living Translation, says, I give you my life to you. I give my life to you. Well, the basis for David to give his life is what? Well, the answer to that is in verse 2. It is trust. David needed to trust God, just like we need to trust God. There's things we just have to have our trust in, and the only certainty is God. And we can talk about that. There's a lot of things. I trust my wife. I trust family. I trust this and that. But as much as I do, the real trust is there's only one place to get that. There's only one place to put that. Well, David had a lot of enemies, and every one of them was seeking his downfall. If you remember all the Bible stories we have read and were taught. And he was in distress. Well, I would be too if I had that much burden on me. He has been pummeled with it. So he asked God to help him. Now, another interesting thing is the word shame is mentioned twice in the next lines of the text that we just read. Now, does David know what shame is? Well, I think he does. The shamefulness that happened with Bathsheba was terrible. David realized it, and we studied that psalm, and that shame is in him. If you do something immoral, should shame be the result? Well, I think yes. That's called conscience. That's what God gave us to keep us on track, was a conscience for that sort of thing. I'm wondering, though, in this passage, if the translators of it might have been better served by using the word disgrace. Now, we could debate that, but it might be a better translation. What I'm saying here is, if David were defeated in all the battles that he were doing, God was not with him. That's the premise. And that would indeed be a shame, wouldn't it, if he were defeated? So anyway, what are the paths that are talked about in verse 4? Well, one of them to me is hope that comes with a trust. You trust and you hope. For us, our struggles with hardships and persecution, illnesses, even death, can be endured because of our hope. And that hope for us is the cross of Jesus, which is a wonderful thing. David asked for guidance in verses 4 and 5. Sometimes we can be a stubborn people. Show me your ways is what he says. Teach me your truths. But and to me that shows David's desire not to be stubborn. He knows he is, but he tried not to. I imagine we all would pray for God to remember us too, as found in the next verse. You know, there are parts of us and things in our past that we've done that we just assume God didn't remember. Is that so? Is that true? I want him to remember me, but I only want him to remember the good parts. Can God forget my sin and our rebellious ways? Well, in verse 7, we see the word steadfast love. Now, in the Hebrew, that word there is H-E-S-E-D, hesed. And admittedly, from most scholars, that word is a bit hard to translate into English. But it means a special relationship of God to his people, an unfailing love is the way one translator did it. So, can God forget our rebellious ways? Yeah, because of this hesed. He can. And we know in modern times, Jesus' promise is that God will do that. Well, let's read some more of our text, beginning in verse 8. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast, love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who is the man who fears the Lord? Him he will instruct in the way that he should choose. His soul shall abide in well-being, and his offspring shall inherit the land. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him. So there's our word. And he makes known to them his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. Well, let's jump right now, because I can't wait, to verse 12, and where it says, who is the man who fears the Lord? And we've already talked about what is fear. It's to be afraid. Can it also mean respect? That's the question. Can fear generate honest respect? I think it can. Does fear, can it generate, does it mean to have a reverence toward something, toward a person? Or to be in awe of something or someone? As it's used here, is fear a bad thing? That's the point. Well, the psalmist describes God as good and upright. I don't think the use of the word fear here is to connotate something that we should run from. I think it's a connotation of respect. And a good ethical person is approachable and less distant, is also what is mentioned in this text. In verse 10, God is steadfast, love, and faithful if we keep his covenant. And of course we understand the covenants that were made with Abraham years and years before this. Well, also what is mentioned there, life is full of snares. And some of these snares we build for ourselves. We get caught up in our own trap. And what David has found out the hard way and sharing with us is that God will get us out of them if we'll just let him do it. Our feet might get tangled up in that net, and God will untangle it for us, get us out of that trap we've gotten caught in, if we'll ask him with a contrite heart. So, good lessons for us to learn. Let's look at verse 16. This is good stuff. It says, turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and what violent hatred they hate me. O guard my soul and deliver me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles. Wow, that's pretty intense, isn't it? David is now pretty specific with his troubles and concerns, and you can tell he's a man that's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I don't know if we can relate to totally to enemies like that he's talking about, how they hate him, the violent hatred, but we can see it in this world, how that happens to people. He was in the snare. His feet were tangled up. He was doing things that God wanted him to do for Israel, but it was just tough for one man to do. Loneliness, personal problems, anguish, affliction, distress. David had faith, though, that God would deliver him from all of this stuff. And he had it. He wanted God to be gracious to him. You know, gracious, the word grace is something that's very important. So, and to me, it spun up something in my head, a saying that just goes a long way. It says, "Don't give me what I deserve. Give me grace and mercy." God loved me enough to don't give me what I earned, because I've made a lot of mistakes. What I really want is grace and mercy. Well, you know, sometimes we as people and Christians, hopefully, we try to go it alone, and we think we don't need any help. You know, we're strong and to ourselves. But you know what? That approach invariably fails. We might do it for a short time, for a short while, but we can't keep it up. We cannot. So we all need help. And as David says, I wait for you, God. I'm going to throw up my hands. I'm going to realize it. I'm going to throw myself on your mercy. And I'm waiting for you. And that's our lesson for tonight. So I wish I could hear your thoughts. I'm looking forward to the dialogue that comes from a lesson like this. Send me a message if you want to, if you have thoughts on that, and that would be great. But until we see each other again, be well, be safe, and God bless you all.